everybody. Welcome. Welcome to this great panel that we have for you this afternoon. I'm really excited for this topic. For those of you that I haven't met or anyone watching on the live stream, I'm Adam Vidixis. I'm one of the organizers of SPLICE, and I am the host and moderator for this panel, AI, Creativity, and the Electroacoustic Imagination. So as artists who engage with technology as one of our primary mediums, practitioners of electroacoustic music are uniquely positioned to engage with artificial intelligence and to consider the implications, the possibilities that this technology brings to the field of music, and questions that contemporary AI raises, questions such as like authorship, agency, automation, creativity, and collaboration are ones that our field have engaged with for decades. So we have a really incredible panel to talk about this. And really what the focus here is not just on new tools and technologies, but on imagination and thinking about the ways in which AI will change the way we create, perform, listen to, and think about music. And also to really make sure that as we move forward with this new technology, as with all technologies, that artists are uniquely in the conversation and able to guide and help make the decisions about what is the ways that we meaningfully and with great imagination engage with these new technologies. So with that, I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves very briefly. So if you could just say just a little bit about yourself. For example, as I mentioned, I'm Adam Vidixis, and I direct the Composition and Music Technology program at Temple University, and I'm one of the organizers of SPLICE.
I'm Eric Souther, Assistant Professor of Kinetic Imaging here at Western Michigan University in the Frosting School there.
I'm Per Bloland. I teach at Miami University, Composition and Music Tech, and I'm also one of the organizers of SPLICE.
I'm Becky Brown. I am the tech director at SPLICE. I am an audio engineer at NPR, and I am a composition, doctoral candidate at the University of Virginia.
Hi everybody, my name is Levi Lorenzo, Assistant Professor of Creative Technologies at the New School College of Performing Arts.
Great. Now, of course, most of you, but this is for posterity, so it's on the video. All right. Well, the first prompt that I have, and I'll say also, I'm gonna have some prompts, and I'm sure this discussion will sort of be wide-ranging among the panelists. Please go ahead and jump in at any point that you want to sort of speak up. And also, if you have any questions or anything like that, we will have time to hear from many of you, as many as possible, towards the end. But if there's something really, really urgent you want to kind of interject, raise your hand. We'll see if we can get it in. But if not, we'll save those things for the end. So you might want to jot things down, and we'll have more of a group discussion, not just questions for the panel, but things that you may want to say or opinions that you have about the topics that we discussed today. So the first prompt that I have for everyone is electroacoustic musicians have a long history of experimenting with new technologies, not just using them, but questioning them, repurposing them, and sometimes resisting them. What does that history teach us about the current moment with AI? Thoughts?
So that's a tough one. You opened up right out of the gate with this very thoughtful, non-specific question. So.
Can you repeat the whole thing?
I can. Electroacoustic musicians have a long history of experimenting with new technologies, not just using them, but questioning them, repurposing them, and sometimes resisting them. So what does this history teach us about the current moment in AI?
One of the first things that occurs to me is when you say AI to, I think, a large part of the population, everyone thinks of LLMs. Mm-hmm. And LLMs are probably among the most fraught versions of AI, just because of environmental issues, all the copyright issues, and the way that they are sort of threatened to dumb down society, right? So, so I think most of us on this panel are using tools that are, we may use LLMs, but there's a huge variety of tools besides LLMs. I mean, LLMs are essentially machine learning structures, and machine learning is a wider field than that. You can have, you have this great continuum, right? You want to say like that, the one that you
You know what I'm talking about? I'm gonna put my hands like this, like you did. So on one side, there's AI tools for specialists, where you really have to have a workflow and a background in a particular field where you could then insert this tool into. But then on the other side, there's this AI tools that I think for non-specialists where it's advertised that you can do something without any training. So I guess that's one polarity. Using this tool with training, and then without training, and then everywhere in between.
I did hear, I'm sure you've all heard like vibe coding. So vibe coding, I would say, is like without training. You're just like, I'm gonna go see what it can do without really knowing what you're asking for. But I've been recently maybe redirected to AI-assisted code. There's other things where it's just an assistant, so it's a supplement to what you already bring to the table.
Maybe you have to know how to code in the first place to use it, or something.
Or at
like
least
that.
you have some kind of understanding of what you're after, so you know how to ask what it is you're after.
And maybe you understand what you're getting at the end to some degree, like so that you could parse it instead of, oh, this is a file full of like 80 semicolons, because I told it make it pass the test, and it passes the test now. The thing that you made me think of, the question made me think of is, I am forgetting the author's name, the journal title, but it's one of the new discipline composers out of Berlin. He had this article called Warum Theater. And the idea is when you think about like fixed media versus live performance of when you have a piece that's only speakers on stage, there's this thing, I forget who mentioned it, maybe you mentioned it yesterday in your talk, when you only have speakers on stage, what is the like contextual identity of those speakers on stage? They're there producing sound, but what, as an actor, what are they doing? And he mentions in this paper that what happens if you just put a piano in the middle of the room? Nobody plays it, but the piano's there. Something has changed about the way, the identity of it. So there's a lot of like resistance that people had to speakers initially of like, well, what are they doing on the stage? They're not actually like presenting anything for me that looks like anything, they're just making sound. What I would say here is kind of the thing of AI of like, how are you using it, how are you misusing it, is mostly like, what is its role in your composition? What kind of an actor is it? Because your piece for tomorrow is very much like the fact that you are in dialogue with the AI in the moment, and the title, neither of us knows what we made, like I am assuming that implies it's like there is this weird sort of space in the piece where no one knows what's going on, and that's like there is a contextual interest there, there's a reason why AI is involved, it's not just kind of like, it's not just there. So that's also what I would say is, what purpose is it serving for you? Is it just like making cool sounds, or is there a reason why that thing is making cool sounds for you?
Yeah. Eric, could you tell us all a little bit about it, since it's one of the most, the pieces that has AI the most foregrounded this week? Can you tell us a little bit about what tomorrow's?
I've actually retitled it Listening Garden, which is I'm making my own DAW with AI. And I actually was thinking about this last night. When we think about software, Photoshop, Ableton, it has a certain frame around it, right? This is meant to do this kind of music, or this is meant to do this. Of course, you can break those frames if you know what you're doing. You can push it to new places. But what does it mean to make your own frames and make your own software? And that's always been a practice in this field and in my field. How do you build your own tools? How do you build your own instruments? But it's something else to be like, well, what is a DAW? How can you be really speculative with what it does? So for maybe an example of this thing, I've grafted biological statistics on how the sounds get generated, and then those can, based on star ratings and tagging, can evolve to new sounds, which is basically signal processing layered on top. So these things are about like mining for sound and looking for sound, and then you can make a composition with those things. There's a lot more that goes into it, but I don't want to hold too much space.
Yeah. Are there other projects that any of the panelists have, whether or not it's being presented this week at SPLICE, but that have engaged with like AI as a primary tool, or even an auxiliary one, whatever it may be?
Yeah, there's at EarCam in Paris, there are some new research groups, and they've been working with AI, and you talked about that at the EarCam, the main EarCam.
Somax 2.
Yeah, Somax 2. But there are these new, they're called hybrid groups, and one of them is specifically tasked with looking at AI. And the thing that this is all, it's a multi-year project. At the end of the first year, they give a talk about what they've done so far, and it's really specific, but it's really cool. So maybe I'll just explain that for a second. I have to refer to my notes here because acronyms. But if you've ever looked at the earcam software available, it's pretty complex. It's very difficult to use. So they decided that they were going to build some tools to help people use those. And there's this protocol called NCP, Model Context Protocol, which is an open source standard for connecting AI applications to external systems, meaning like other pieces of software. So you can essentially use an AI-based system to like send commands to open music to get what you want, and then you could theoretically use an LLM to like to prompt that, right? So instead of learning, I mean, this may be a bad thing ultimately, but instead of actually learning open music, you can just use whatever Claude to get the result you want. But it also connects multiple systems, so you can use one control system to tell open music to generate some material and then pass it on to Modalise, which is a physical modeling software, build like a performer in using physical models, and then output that. So what was an incredibly complex system that took years to learn how to use would be made easier and hopefully not watered down too much. But it's just such an interesting prospect. I really like that. And then as another layer, they were talking about building a DAW to control that. So so now you can, instead of like dealing with in open music, you have to specify your rhythms and all that kind of stuff. You can just move it over a little bit. And how nice would that be to move something over a little bit and have it appear in your notation software and then be performed by. So yeah, so lots of possibilities there. I'll let y'all know how it goes.
Great. I mean, what I'm also hearing is like, one is translation,
Yeah.
right? But like, people that knew how to do binary wasn't very happy about object-oriented programming when it came online. So they're like, oh, this is gonna dumb down, like you need to know the ones and zeros. But like, oh, actually it's really powerful to have a set of language that humans can understand to translate the binary.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're just kind of going up that ladder of translation.
But there's a limit, right? Because eventually you get to the point where you have, let's say, a joystick, and you turn it to the left to get one result, and to the right to get another result, right? And then that's it, and then it outputs a score. And like that's not what, that's not the level of simplicity, right? So
Sure.
Every level of simplicity sort of reduces the richness in some way. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think at a certain point you can get to a point where it's a little too diluted. So
I guess you're getting to the point of the title of the thing, of electroacoustic creativity. And
Right.
at some point, you've just flattened the whole thing down to nothing.
Sure.
Yeah, and remains an open question. Libby, I'm curious just to hear more about your engagement with AI in your own practice.
First, I want to go back to the initial prompt. I had
Okay.
a thought that I wanted to share.
Sure, absolutely.
So interrogating and questioning and possibly resisting, and then maybe eventually accepting a particular tool. Let's pick one, like the drum machine. So we can play drums without a human, and it can play perfect rhythm every time, and you don't have to do the work for it. But then it doesn't have that same soul, as they say, or that it feels square and rigid. And then people would say, I'd rather have a real drummer play this. But then it became its own aesthetic. It became a whole other genre of music that was really on the grid, really quantized in the box. So there was resistance to that, but then it just became its own thing. Another tool I'll throw out there just to just start the conversation, say like auto-tune. You don't really have to be a good singer. It's making something easier for you. And that then became its own aesthetic. And I don't know how many times people have lost jobs because somebody went in and sung poorly through autotune and then beat somebody that was an actual good singer that could sing in tune. So in terms of interrogating what AI can do now, I think it's a similar thing. It's potentially replacing something a human can do, but it might just become its own thing.
Yeah. So there's some people who and this is pretty common, kind of talk about it as uniquely different from almost any technology that's come before, right? In the sense that the act of resisting might be a challenge in that engaging with it at all. Like oftentimes you can engage with something in order to show that it has a downside. I'm curious what your thoughts are about that with regard to engagement with AI, and also the possibilities that are there. Like what are the new things that can be created? What are those avenues that you imagine will be newly possible for people, whether that's ease of creation, opening doors for people, or even new things that couldn't have been created before, and also that flip side of, is it, in your view, unique in that way that any engagement with it has an issue of the ways in which you might resist it?
So the speed, I've been a toolmaker for the past 15, 20 some years, and it usually takes me about a month to 2 months to make a new tool. And what I'm talking about is usually visual. I've probably made 3 years of work in the past month and a half. And what it feels like is that the software is an oscillation. And what I'm talking about is the speed of development is so fast it feels like an oscillator. And then so the materiality of software becomes malleable.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of crazy, but it is tremendously powerful if you know what you're asking for.
Yeah.
Other thoughts on that? I think it can play a part in the learning process of any new skill. I mean, these LLMs are trained on the entire internet, all documentation. So if you say, I want to learn JavaScript, or I want to learn a super collider, you can ask it general things and it can output a super collider patch for you. Or if you know a little bit of super collider, you can take your small bit of super collider code and put it into ChatGPT, and then it can say you can do this better if you did it this way, or you can say I want 100 voices and I want this kind of process. So I haven't quite put my finger on it yet, but it can have a productive place in learning and also a destructive place in learning, where you don't necessarily have to put the time in and hit those walls and really scratch your head and try to solve that problem and come to that aha moment manually. And everybody in this room we've gotten stuck on a max patch or stuck in a technical process, and then after all this effort we've pushed through and then we've learned so much from that. And so I don't want that process to be lost.
It seems like a lot of what we're talking about is the concept of friction, which I think about a lot. The good and the bad, right? So I was talking about it in terms of open music earlier. I was writing a piece where it was really complicated lines up and down, and I was working out intervals, and it was taking forever. And then I wrote an open music patch to do it for me, and so that reduced the friction. Like I could do it manually, but I wasn't gonna, right? So I would hear the line, and I'd be like, "It's not right," and then I would spend an hour fixing it, and I'd be like, "It's fine." But then when I had the open music patch, that friction was gone. I could just be like, doop, 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 and then all of a sudden I got the exact thing that I wanted, which was great. And so the friction, the bad side of that is if I spent all that time working with those intervals, I would have gotten really fast at doing it, and the piece that took a year and a half would have taken 3. So that's bad. Also good, but bad. Ultimately, I would rather have that piece sooner. Not, it was for Keith. And he waited for quite some time for it. So, he provided certain friction as well. No, he was very accommodating. But anyway, so the friction where we choose not to do something that we would otherwise do because it's too hard. I feel like notation software is filled with these things, right? You write something. You put in all the notation and you're like, oh, I want to make a change, but I have to redo all this stuff. And it would sound better if you did. But, of course, then you learn how to use the DAW better and you learn to do it faster and all this kind of stuff. That's the friction of learning versus the friction of producing.
I guess to then hone that one more time, like that all relates to what part of the process is actually important to you. So is the friction of going through all the intervals, is that important? Does that lead you to something aesthetically more interesting? Like for me, I have not yet vibe coded or AI assisted code. I just program because, you know, I've been doing it for a while. And for me, part of it's like, I am working through the problem as I am making the thing. So as opposed to just like, hey, build me a thing that fixes my tech for me, it's like, okay, which parts of this are important that I want to figure out? And for me, a lot of the times when I am programming something, it's I'm trying to figure out what I actually want. And for me, I wouldn't know how to prompt AI to do that because I have not yet coalesced it for myself. I am figuring it out in the moment as I am making the thing. But that's like two different forms of friction. For me, that friction is like, oh my God, the concert is next Friday. And it needs to be done really soon, and I am figuring it out.
So many creative breakthroughs come from the constraints of the medium or from the technology. We're talking about a lot of these that become easier, become frictionless or more frictionless because of AI. Are there constraints that you see that kind of create those artistic bounds within AI, and what are they?
Money? To start with.
Yeah.
Feelings about environment, depending on, with some of these more like music-focused models, I'm not sure, hello, I'm a rube, how much of this is happening in your own PC versus getting queried to elsewhere, issues of data centers and et cetera. So we'll just put the environmental issue out there because it's a thing.
Yeah, 100%. Anything about the technology itself you see as those sort of creative bounds, especially those that they're sort of working more closely with it? Like where are those limits? Where are those things that you're kind of wrangling to get that creative thought through?
I guess some of the creative thoughts is about being just speculative with what software can be. So like, I guess for example, something I built in the past 2 days, was I got a Google Map type Google Earth render of the Earth, and it allows you to zoom way in and find a location on the Earth, and then put a sound there. And it's a speculative question. What is it for a sound to grow in a location, right? So I like this idea of locality. I can pull weather data from the last 50 years from that location, and then it's about mapping that. It's about sonification. So this isn't, I guess what I'm describing is AI helped me build a system that in the end is just procedural. It's just about numbers. So it's not an AI process after it's solidified in software. So then it's about building a taxonomy between what is heat related to like drive or the warmth of a sound, or what is the individual wind, if averaged over 50 years, how does that put things spatially in ambiosonics? Does the wind help drift the sound? So then it's asking these fun questions like, what is a sound in a behavioral sonic space? So like I have these sonic agents that have like a predator-prey models. So like a predator will chase a prey spatially in ambiosonics, third order. And I have about 8 voices that's going to perform in real time with my fixed media sound piece. So it's listening and then responding and improvising on top. So it's like, what can you do? But it's also not good at having original ideas, I don't think. So it's good at pattern recognition, and it's also good at synthesis. So if you have an idea from outside of your field, somewhere in the sciences, like biology or weather, and you want to apply that to music making, or what's the mix match, right? So again, I feel like it is synthesis, but you're synthesizing ideas and it's helping you make those things.
So do you see that also then as something other than the time component, which is not, but, or perhaps maybe the point is that the time component is so collapsed that it is genuinely a new thing, how fast, like it creates a new space that is not simply, because obviously anyone that was coding previously before AI had to have hopefully a good idea, and then, did the work to code it. And now
the same thing probably would took
collapse.
6 months probably.
Exactly, yeah. So what in your view are the things that change with that time frame so significantly collapse. Like Becky was talking about, the working out in the moment, right? As the coding is happening, there's also a problem solving.
There's a
and
problem
this
solving,
kind of-
but there's also like a reveal.
Mhm.
Like, it made this weather system, it plotted this like cloud and spatialized, and it has these lines going. I'm like, oh, that's just arc, like motion vectors for how sound travels in a 3D space.
Mhm.
Can you make that a filter for other sounds? And it's like, yeah, sure, let's do it.
Mhm.
So it's like, it's about a listening and reflecting while you're building things with it to then build new features and new ways of working with sound that you weren't expecting.
Yeah.
And that to me feels like creativity.
Absolutely. Other people in the panel, what do you think about that idea of the sort of unique bounds that AI might provide? What are those constraints, and where are that sort of moment for creative breakthrough that's perhaps unique?
I'll speak to my experience working with Somax 2, which was, as I mentioned yesterday, supposed to be this co-improviser, co-composer. You play your instrument at it, and it responds to you. But it doesn't just respond to you just out of the box. You really have to configure all these tiny sliders and tiny values. And naively, I thought that it would work very quickly out of the box. But listening back to it, something that I was butting up against was just my own taste, and saying, you know, that wasn't very good. I thought it was going to be better than that. Okay, I'm going to move this slider a little better, I think. Okay, let me move it back halfway. Maybe a little. So I spent so many hours, and I think I can put so many more hours into assessing and learning and connecting with what it's actually spitting back at us. And I think with I'll just go out and say that with any medium, any sort of practice that AI could apply to, there's a human on the other end that should say, yeah, that's pretty good. We shouldn't just automatically think that it's the right answer because it came from this machine. I have kind of a nerd for cognitive biases, and one is automation bias, and where you just think that it's the right answer because it was automated by this software. Mm-hmm. And so there's a human on the other end of it to say, no, that's not right. So negotiating that, using it to give you an answer, but then ultimately there has to be somebody on the other end to say, yeah, that's not quite right. Let's try again.
Great.
Yeah, I think there is also that sense of like the predictive range of things that you were talking about with, it can only, like, these models can literally only do what they're told within some range of, you know, the entire corpus of human existence. You still have to feed it some amount of something for it to understand what it's doing. So a project that I did a while ago, so the models were much worse, was I attempted to AI generate an entire news site. So generated a bunch of articles for like, this is your local news station, and then found a corpus and then scraped the entire corpus of all the banner ads I could find for every company. I still have them sitting in my hard drive somewhere. And then attempted to just AI generate banner ads. And it did okay. But it was still like within those bounds, I could get some pretty decent images of, I think, Anne Hathaway gazing longingly at a burger. And so like in that sense, there was something lovely that came out of this bizarre world that I found myself in. But at the same time, it's like, it will only give you back what you've given it, and if you gave it maybe some really bad JPEGs, you're gonna get some really bad JPEGs back. So there's still like, earlier on in sort of the ChatGPT models, there was a great project I saw of someone who grabbed as many bios off of LinkedIn as they could and LLM'd that, and the thing that you got was like, okay, it starts fine, and then I am a software developer at Facebook, I am a software developer at Meta, I am a software developer at Meta. And that kind of like repetitiveness is an interesting, like, that is a restriction of the thing, of like, even though they're so much better, there is still a very repetitive and false nature about it. But that's an interesting thing to play with, of like, are all of these people all carbon copies of each other? And that's the thing that AI is like elevating, is like, oh no, you're all the same. So this is both an answer to the what are the restrictions with it, and also what are the things that are possible with it. Additionally, there's that concept of the centaur. I think this is more a thing with chess, where it's like the person who is good at chess is very good at chess. the AI who's good at chess is also very good at chess. If those two things work together, they are better than either of them separately at playing chess. So, you know.
There's also, I just read this book, I think it's called Ways of Being or something like that.
Oh,
James
James
Bridle.
Bridle?
Yeah. And it's ostensibly about AI, but it's really about intelligence in all its forms. So like slime mold intelligence, that got famous for a while because I could solve puzzles fast or something. But one of the things that he talks about that I think is sort of relevant to kind of what you were talking about and everything is that when the internet first came about, we learned so much about networks, and it spawned new mathematical models, and it basically revealed something about the theoretical world that we live in that we did not have access to beforehand. So regardless of what you think about the internet, that was a point of sort of collective development. We were lifted up in some way beyond our capacities that had actually nothing to do with the internet itself, just what we had learned from our capacity to work within this kind of network system. So he speculates that AI may offer us new insights into our own intelligence, for example, which is kind of what the book is about. Or who knows what, like just ways of, already I'm reading articles in the New Yorker about like Claude, what is Claude, and what does it tell us about like what it means to be intelligent or human? If you can have the Turing test is like long gone, right? Like that's easy now. So we need new standards for what it means to be human. And we better come up with some ideas kind of quickly. I don't know, maybe it's not imperative, but like we're already at a point where like how do you define that? I mean, obviously, but it, like the mind, right? How do you define the mind, the human mind, as distinct from what all these AIs maybe can't do quite yet, but very soon will be able to do? So this is not a new question, but we've never had the ability to test our answers in the way that we can now, and in the way that we will soon. So what will that reveal about human intelligence and so many things that we don't even know the answer to?
Question.
I was just wondering, have you heard of the ARC AGI thing?
Mm-mm.
I went down this rabbit hole at some point of like trying to like build puzzles that Claude couldn't solve and stuff like that. And I was doing a good job until I let it code. And then once it could code, it was really, really good at solving puzzles. Like it was pretty hard to stump it. So then I asked Claude, like, what's the current state of the art of like what like AIs can't do? And it pointed me toward this thing, this ARC AGI prize. I think it's a prize. I think it's like money at stake. It's basically like 400 tiny computer games that have been made by human video game developers, right? And you're thrown into this game where you know you can use the arrow keys and the mouse, and you know nothing else about the game. And it's like, I really recommend you try to play these games. Like you should really try it. They're really cool because you start and you're like, I don't know what the heck is going on. What even is this doing? And then you usually pretty quickly stumble upon some idea of what's going on, and then you start to get it. And all of the top AIs just crash and burn on this. So,
Interesting, yeah.
That's reassuring.
Yeah. Well, I wanna kind of pivot the conversation a little bit related to what you've been talking about, Per, and what Becky kind of really hit on earlier, which is around ethical questions. And the ethical questions around AI often focus on training data, attribution, labor, and transparency. So what responsibilities do artists have when using AI in their work? And are there norms or guidelines that you think our field should adopt?
I'll just say real quick, I think a lot of the things that are questionably ethical, we may be able to grapple with, but the fact that AI is pulling from existing knowledge and can't go beyond that will flatten everything and make the world entirely mediocre in ways that will just suck. And I don't see a way around that.
The essential laundry machine nature of it just keeps,
Yeah.
will keep cycling at some point.
Yep.
Yeah.
No new ideas,
What was
but
it? Like the
convincingly.
image models are like getting worse because
Oh,
now they're starting to
they're
feed
self-
their own.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you look at AI generated videos, like there is a style, right? Everyone uses the style, and like, I mean, it was cool at first, but
When it comes to code, just some like practical things. Make sure you know what your licenses are in GitHub. There's MIT license, which is probably the most open. GLP, you have to be able to share the open source code back, copy left. I didn't know anything about this about a month and a half ago, but like, yeah. So you need to know what the licenses allow you to do, and then that you can just kind of grab them and use them for whatever you want, depending on if they give you that permission. Then you can ask it to make sure it keeps very detailed notes on where you're pulling things and where you're referencing things. You can also ask it to keep a detailed record of what your prompts are, because you can't copyright code generated by AI right now. But there is some lawyers, and I think were we talking about
We're
this
talking
last
about
night?
the launch,
That they are trying to advocate for, if you are, let's say, 10,000 prompts in to develop something, there's a lot of your creativity and you're pushing to fix things, to add new features, to do these things that is human oriented. So that would be my two, and then, you know, don't take from somebody that's alive. Like, that's one thing. Like, if I'm looking for composer logic, or I'm trying to think about these things, I'm not going to pull from somebody that's actively trying to have a career in this space.
Well, actually, speaking of which, when it comes to navigating this space and like, proprietary lines begin to get a bit blurred. I mean, I think I think oftentimes in this conversation, people harken back to like the legality of like sampling and how like pulling different snippets, whether it be like speaking, like some sort of interview with like someone, or like even a previous song that was made by someone. In terms of navigating the legality from a creative perspective, as someone who's utilizing certain aspects of AI, as well as an artist who is navigating a space where they're just going to be creating music of their own, and potentially feeling vulnerable to their own like bespoke work being used by these models. What kind of responsibilities do you think are like necessary for both ends?
Yeah, and I want to also piggyback on that there is somewhat of a difference that is important to note between pulling from, say, GitHub, that these libraries that have some kind of copyright associated with them, whether it's however it's specified, right? Whether it's open or not, and then also the actual work that oftentimes is not, that you don't know what the attribution is, right? Because it's just coming out of the LLM and is trained on data that's other, that is not. And you mentioned also like living composers. I think it's many of you have probably done it, but it's interesting to see what types of things get generated when you put your own name in there. Like, AI certainly knows what my music sounds like, because if you ask it to write something like Adam Dixon, you hear like a lot of drum set and a whole lot of bleep blop bloops. Doesn't quite sound like my style, but it must know what my music is, right, to some degree. So that is baked in the cake for everybody across all. I mean, all musicians. If you've ever put something on the internet, it's probably in some training data somewhere. So kind of where I'll also point out that when we're talking about guidelines, oftentimes there is a thing now still, this comes up even in universities around, having an AI guideline, right? Make sure the students say to what degree they're using AI or not, and having clear guidelines on how that should be. So, I'm curious to hear from the panel, like what you think. It's clear in this case, Eric, for example, that you made it clear that in the project you're presenting tomorrow, that all the ways in which AI is being used. There's another world, and you're like, oh, this is my DAW, right? And nobody knows. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm saying, what do you all feel is the obligation or guidelines or proper use, or sort of how should we deal with this as a field?
One thought to put out there, as I've just been trying to navigate through this dense AI conversation over the past year or so, I've just been trying to organize it into buckets. And so 2 main buckets for AI tools, let's say in music. One is for creativity and sort of simulating human cognition. The other one is just analytical tools to accomplish tasks. And think the ownership and authenticity conversation points more to the creativity bucket. So I think that the term AI is so confusing because it can mean both of those things, and it's hard to kind of put your finger on which AI are we talking about. But something like stem separation, or for mixing and mastering and applying EQ to a lot of files immediately, that's just a closed objective task that I think is okay to do. That's an easier yes for me than the pulling creativity out of it. So I would just invite people to research the different tools out there and try to figure out which bucket that's in. Is it creating a new musical gesture, new musical ideas, or is it helping one of the dozens of intermediate tasks within the process?
Tira?
I actually want to sorry, I'm just taking a breath. Want to question all of you on, so you mentioned how there are different AI tools, and the AI term being a catch-all term for so many different technologies that do very different things, right? As educators, what strategies can we adopt to, tell students that, okay, this is a problem-solving tool, machine learning, and there are different implementations of it, and that it might be beneficial to learn some of them, and it might be beneficial to learn all of them, but then choose wisely what is good for one's work, what might be detrimental. Because oftentimes I see the conversation focuses more on, oh, is it making our life easier or not? Is it making us more efficient or not? But how important do you think it is to understand what is going on under the hood? Because we as, technologically sort of advanced practitioners, we like digging deeper into the technology oftentimes. So how deep can we go? How deep should we go?
And my quick answer is, let's say at my university or the new school, I've put it out there to the higher ups that there should be faculty training for every faculty member. So let's say the beginning of the semester to just try X number of tools, just so that there's contact with these processes, and there's just some experience. So then they can advise students and make calls on positive and negative and somewhere in between uses. I just think that it's so self-motivated how deep one gets. I think there should be like a baseline for educators at universities. That's my first quick answer. We should at least just begin to use it, and then we can have a chance at even just digging deeper and understanding the algorithms.
And before we have sort of other shifts of conversation, I really want to make sure we come back and have the other kind of opportunity for the other panelists to kind of speak to the guidelines part, like to what degree should we as a field be, and this is not necessarily hard rules like if you don't then this, but oftentimes they're just social constraints, and where you feel like Levy kind of weighed in a bit about whether, where that bound falls between these sort of two buckets, and what are your thoughts on, to the degree that you should be mentioning or attributing AI when you use it in your work?
Well, I mean, we're mostly talking about LLMs here, right? Like, I don't think anybody would say SOMAX is unethical. It's built in-house at EarCam. It's not pulling from, other people's work. Like machine learning tools like Glaucoma, if you know what that is, I don't know of any ethical, I mean, you can say it makes things too easy or whatever, but that's not really an ethical thing, right? It's not destroying the environment, it's not generifying the world, and it's not stealing from other people's work. So I think we're just talking about LLMs with that.
And I think at this point it's also like everyone's coming to some degree their own.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're making the point that the one of the clear lines for you is the idea of authorship. And if this is trained on sort of an ethical corpus, then go for it, and you don't need to.
Wow.
Right? Is that?
I mean, I think all three of those things are important. the three buckets that I'm setting up specifically for LLMs, and I don't know enough about the field to know if this is only for LLMs, but I can't think of other examples of this than that. The environmental impacts, which are huge, the ethical problems of stealing other people's ideas, and the generification of our intellectual culture.
I think there's also something to be said, this might also sort of is part of maybe an answer to your question, like the idea of transformativity, like how much, which is sort of a concept that's part of the Creative Commons in general of, and also sampling, there is some degree of permissibility of sampling if it is sufficiently transformative. And you can ask the question like, what do you mean by sufficiently transformative? That could mean a lot of things. I actually, like, because I sample things that are non-music and sometimes don't ask for permission, there's this question of, okay, so what counts as sufficiently transformative? And if you're sampling from something that's from a completely different field, so in my case, if I'm sampling from the news media, in music, those two fields are separate worlds. So because you are using them in essentially venues where, venues in kind of a generic sense, where if I am making music out of the news, no one thinks that I am NBC when I am sampling from NBC. So there's that. This is like outside of music. But considering if you are making large transformative moves on someone else's work, that is, you know, you've taken it as a starting point, but you've evolved it to the point where maybe it no longer sounds like that at all, and it was simply your starting point. I still think in that case that that person deserves to have a conversation, assuming they're alive, that like you should actually talk about permission and whatnot, and there's probably a reason why you're using this person's sounds in the first place. So I think considering how much is it transforming, or how much is it, you know, I want to generate a picture that looks like it came out of Studio Ghibli. Like that's one version of this where it's like, oh, I just want to spit out things and not have to learn to draw myself, versus I want to do something that I haven't seen before. So this is almost like, for your project with Somax that you were talking about, it is based on a large corpus of other people's stuff, but they knew that you were doing it, and you talked to them and had conversations, and that was the whole point of the project. So it feels like there has to be a certain level of human dialogue in order to like use someone else in your art, regardless of whether it's AI or not.
I mean, it's easy though to think about how diffusion models make images and be like, oh, we didn't ask for this technology, right? It got put on top of us. And it has an industry behind it that's not concerned with humans. But then it just muddies everything. So your overgeneralization fear, I think, is a real one. Like diffusion is about a blurring and then focusing in on something. Once we find these things, how do you do an attribution if it's like 0.25% or even smaller, right? If we're talking about like 0.00002% of somebody's image.
Well, what if it's a black box? You never know.
Yeah.
And you never know. So then what are we left with? How do we attribute something that was stolen from us to begin with?
You can't.
I want to bring up an AI music tool that's very much on the other end of the spectrum from Somax. It's called Suno.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's
Never heard of it. Just kidding.
oh, some people have it, and that's trained on all published music, and so that's that. I feel it's extremely unethical, and that's for people that are called non-specialist musicians, and so that's just the other end of it. So that's a tool I was thinking about.
Yeah.
There's also it's good to know about other kinds of all the tools out there. I mean, there's like Google Magenta Labs, there's 11 Labs, there's Udio, and just to kind of see where these different companies have their footing in this in all the technology.
I mean, I guess to muddy that further, if you make stuff with these platforms, you get sound files and you bring them to your DAW and then do other effects on top. It can be modular still. It doesn't have to be just one output.
Yeah.
The whole field of creativity can be, because some of the best AI work I've seen is it's not just this. It's like it goes to a painting or it goes to this. And so there's some kind of other human intervention that makes it something else.
I'm really interested in small language models, like the idea that at some point we'll be able to train up a model ourselves based on, and pick our sources and then use that to do things that we wouldn't be able to do. Because that, like, you're not destroying the world by making your computer run. Well, you are, but not in the way that like an entire factory would. And you know who you're pulling from, and it still makes things easy. So that friction part is still there. But I don't know. It seems like I don't think we can do that now very well. That's hard to do. But it seems to be. People are talking about it. It seems to be coming.
So I'm really curious to see from people here as well where they feel like that boundary is. Like, it's easy to define the endpoints to some degree, right? About like someone stole everything, they didn't give anyone any credit, right? Versus like, oh, this is a very carefully curated amount. Like, to what degree should AI have attribution? Go, Dan.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to just quickly like shoot off some things that I've been thinking about like human integration. So I don't think you're talking about this, Becky, but in a similar thing, I believe it was George Lewis wrote about a hand craned piano about at a bar, and there was like a self-playing piano on one that he talked about, and then there was a hand and piano. But then the one that had a crank, that everyone loved because there was a human sort of doing it. And then you brought up drum machines, and like Adam knows from my piece, I'm into extreme drumming. And a byproduct of that was like sample replacement, which is it's own aesthetic, but it was actually originally created because you have these musicians that can't play, and the microphone moves on the amp, and so it's solving all these problems. And now it's actually part of the lexicon, so you'll have really killer drummers, and they'll have samples, and it'll be professionally recorded, and in a nice room, and a ton of automation, and that will sound like the most like awesome, intense sound. So there is like. Some of these are being integrated now. This doesn't go to AI yet, but so when we talk about like integrating with humans, Scott Deal, who recently passed, he worked with Jason Polaromo on software that would play back his improvising style, and it was only for him. So he would play marimba or harpsichord or vibes, and it would spit back something out, and it was just his, and that's how they kind of kept it ethical, and he used that. In his opera Alexia. So I work at a middle school, and I know people who are non-musicians who have used Suno, and at the school they wrote these poems, and the teacher wanted them to do something cool. We're talking about 5th grade here, so like 10 and 11-year-olds. And they absolutely loved like make a country song and then put their sounds to it. One kid even like did like a TikTok where he was mouthing the words, so that was kind of interesting. And they were like more into that than me bringing my guitar and like copying them and like whatever sort of style. Now I'm not like, oh no, I'm losing my job. Like my job isn't to play guitar with the kids. But I guess my question is like, I'm really interested in these like collaborations. I don't want to use like the word like transhumans because I know tech bros have kind of taken that, but like this integration of like human with machine, like making something unique, like with the hand crank or how in like metal and like this idea of drum sampling kind of came about, this new technology that's going to replace. And for a bunch of kids in bedrooms, for example, like who can't get a drummer, don't have the money for that, it helps, so it gets more music out there too. I'm just wondering, like, Eric, you kind of talked about like your perspective on that and how you're building systems and it's helping you build systems and get your ideas. And I think your ideas are the main thing.
We have one minute.
Yeah, sorry. But yeah.
Yeah, we just need to wrap it up. Yeah. So.
Yeah, just what you guys, I don't know, what are your thoughts on like integrating with that, like in those kind of ways? Is that like?
I don't think binaries are interesting. I think hybridity is interesting.
Yeah.
And then if you have hybridity matched with modularity, then your system can flow.
Yeah.
Cool. So we are almost at time. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists very briefly in like 30 seconds or less. In 10 years from now, using your imagination, your electroacoustic imagination, what do you think, what would you like to see this hybridity, this combination, this joining of this technology with humans or a resisting of it? What do you want to see 10 years in the future look like? We'll start with Lev.
It's nice to be asked to try to tell the future.
This is the best. We're gonna come back in 10 years. We're gonna see who's right. Yeah.
I would love to see this technology used to inspire more musicians to play. That then would be a gateway to make them want to make the music on their own. to say, this is fun, this is interesting, I can do this. Now I'm kind of, I've been pulled in and hooked into these kinds of sounds and processes. I kind of want to do this on my own. That's what I'd love to see.
Cool. That's great.
All of that is an on-ramp. In addition to people get better, making better things, I think there's also a good positive part of sort of the directness of Suno, of people start to identify, like the YouTube filter, the bad YouTube filter, people start to recognize it and go, ugh. So my hope is that there is sort of there's a version of that kind of music that becomes memes and it lives in the memes world and it's fine. But then there's also people start to crave some amount of human interaction that they were missing before. And so the repetitiveness of AI makes us want more actual in-person musical experience.
And that's happening, which is awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I see it. My quick answer is I think if we take the continuum between easy to do and hard to do, and then extend that into impossible, if we move it over here, then that opens up the impossible. And so I want to know what's in there.
Cool. And Eric, we'll give you the last word.
I guess I'm hopeful about accessibility. I'm curious what if there is no accessibility issues to like build their own software, what they're going to build. So I'm curious what tools are going to come out in the next 2 years.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you all very much for sharing your thoughts and your views. I'm sure this will spill out into lots of other cool conversations over the coming days, and we're really looking forward to your concert tonight. Please join me in thanking the panel.
Everybody do some quick snaps for